Hello. So here's my review of the Eonon GA9465. I've successfully fitted this in my BMW E91. It's a 2011 car, but not without problems. This little video shows the final usefulness of the kit, which I hope is going to play. So switching on, we've got the radio. And Google Maps, and now we're going to reversing towards an obstacle. I've got the reversing camera fitted, which is not a standard feature of the kit, but it obviously gives you that possibility. Just to show you there that we are there. So great, obviously gives you the option then to put Waze or other Android things, any other apps on that system. Obviously there I had my phone providing the internet connection. So why did I do this? Well, we had a bit of a disaster with some coffee in the car. It leaked actually through just under the air vents through the trim and dripped onto the radio. You can see there, I think a little drip went in there and the radio stopped working within about 3 seconds. The problem is that the radio also controls all the warning signals, so your seatbelt warnings, fuel light, tyres, parking sensors, you name it, anything that has a warning on the car, you don't get anymore if the radio dies. So I got this estimate for repair from a local place, and after charging me 80 quid to diagnose it, they then wanted 425 to replace a board and refit the unit and recode it to the car and all that jazz. So I thought, well, this is an opportunity to maybe put something better in the car, and hence tried to go for this GA9465. Just a note, my radio had this connector on the back and it took me a long time to figure out what it was, and I'm pretty certain it goes to the USB in the armrest. I haven't actually reconnected that one because there are other USBs I decided to use. So what were the problems we had? Well, the first one really was, if you listen here, there. And again. So the radio was, and I didn't notice this till I went for a drive. It was fine when I testing in the driveway, but when I went for the first time driving around, I noticed this radio cutting out, and it seemed to be a feature. The next problem was that the time was all messed up. So
it's 8:30 in the morning. Just start up the car, waiting for this system to come on. The time is showing 16:47, which is probably the last time the car was running yesterday. So now the car's on, still showing 16:47.
So, and this was a feature, I mean, I put it on GPS update and it seemed eventually to update the clock, but if I set it up the way the installation manual said, this is what happened. That basically every time you stop the car, the clock stops. Although I must say, I had it. It was also a feature that the car clock on the steering wheel would originally show the correct time, but then when the unit started, it would overwrite that time, so with the wrong time. So this was a bit crazy. And when I put the GPS time update on, it could still take 8 to 10 minutes. I mean, sometimes I did a whole drive, like a 10-12 minute drive, and the clock was still wrong. I also had an issue. This video shows you that I think I changed some of the apps on the home screen. I put Waze on, and I decided to move some of the things around like you do on your phone. And whether that's the cause of this, but the whole thing just went into complete lockdown. It lost all the presets. The radio is not showing any.
That's where I was driving a few minutes ago. Radio here says it's got. So on home it says it's got radio. So how's that got turned off?
I think this is rather a long clip. I ended up going to the settings and rebooting, restarting the whole thing and setting it.
Sorry for you put a new wheel on? Am I selling it to you?
No, I've got 3 bikes in my shed outside here, so
in your shed
to sell it to me.
They ever come out?
I'll sell you. I can sell you one.
So at the end of this, I go into settings and restart. I set it all back to factory settings, and that, you know, obviously put all the apps back in the original places, and that hasn't happened again. But I'm a bit reluctant now to move things around on the screen. Here's a sort of, so I think, well, I don't know whether that's explained, but there's a series of slides here that show you some of the features of installing it, highlighting some of the major problems that I had. This is just what's in the box. The unit, the top of the unit's got the sort of system diagram on. You've got these trim panels. You've got a heck of a lot of wires. This is putting it in first time. I mean, there's lots of videos online about how to take the radio out and how to change other radios, so I'm not going to go into massive detail here. So this is the connector to that white thing on the back of my radio that I didn't end up connecting to. So the USB in my armrest is now defunct. But that I didn't see as a big problem, because you've got 3 other USB outlets from this thing, and I've put them in better places, I think, than they were before. Lots of wires. This CAN bus decoder, I think, is maybe not as good as it could be. Maybe there are better ones out there with other providers. Well, I said, I still can't figure out what some of these wires. There's no explanation for what they do. Presumably for some other vehicle or whatever. The CAN bus on the BMW is supposed to take care of everything, but you know. Side 3 major issues: the radio cutting out, the clock time was a complete mess. The parking sensors were not as reliable as before. I mean, I think I showed you the parking sensors in the first video, but for me, the original radio gave you a lot of confidence when you're reversing, and the reason I fitted the rear view camera was to mitigate the fact that the signals from this unit don't seem to be as good as the what I had before. So I decided to call support on these things. I mean, it does say working hours is China time here on the little card you get. You phone them, you get a automated response. It sends you a text, or you send them a text, and you text them your email address, and they then start corresponding with your email, and typically you email them in the afternoon and they get back to you overnight, so you get the answer in the morning. So it works pretty well. To get some, I'm not sure what that video is showing, other than again the time issues that I was having, updating to GPS, and then eventually you'll see the time change, I think, here. Yeah. So the most useful thing I got from the support line was to put in a 12-volt permanent supply to the unit, and that seemed to solve most of the issues, but I have to say it's not trivial to do it. The next few slides are going into some of the details of fitting it. So start with this one where, oops, gone too far now. So I saw quite a few videos online of people hacking the climate control sides off with pincers and all kinds of tools, and I thought it was a bit random, so I thought I'd share this. This is the trim panel that comes in the box and is one of the final bits that you fix, and I used it as a guide as to where to trim this plastic off, and then I cut the little metal springs down, thus flip them around, and therefore when I was putting this unit in and out, it was a lot less likely to be scratching the car interior. I mean, I think at this time I'd had the thing in and out 8 times, and by the time I'd finished troubleshooting the reversing camera and goodness knows what, I probably had it in and out about 20 times. Here's the final thing that I had when I've trimmed that off, and as I say, flip these around, I still was using a kind of smooth knife blade to put this in and out without scratching the sides. Where am I now? I don't know where I was on there. Yeah, that's fine. Let's move me out of the way. So this is showing without the 12-volt supply. Each time you start up the car,
every time you start up, it's like a 1-minute startup time. Maybe 45 seconds.
and as I mentioned there, you got no audio warnings from anything during that time that the radio's off. So as I mentioned, they told me on the support line to put a 12-volt permanent supply, and the reason for that was to solve the clock time issue, because with the 12-volt permanently on, then the clock keeps going. I was worried that the radio would just stay on, but it didn't. Here's me finding a suitable 12 volt point in the fuse board, and that's the one I chose there, just top left hand corner. If your car's the same configuration mine, that might help you find a 12 volt supply. I took some advice there was someone on one of the forums that mentioned soldering a wire onto one side of the fuse. You have to trim it down carefully, get to the inside, solder in there, and that was the wire I fitted. Here in the foreground you can see that I then have a connector so that I can disconnect the radio without having to pull that fuse out necessarily. It was very tight. I put insulation around that. I only just got it in to the holder. You've got to be very, very neat doing that. And then I put a label on the wire so that people know what it is in the future. That I think would be helpful to any of you. The support line also gave me the password for the factory menus, and it was really just to check this radio region was in the right place, which it was. One nice thing in here, if you aren't putting a 12 volt supply, you can change the logo for the car, so instead of seeing Eon on it, it says BMW or whatever. Now that I've got the 12 volt supply in, I rarely see that startup screen anyway, so non-issue for me. I went on to relocate, if you've got heated seats or auto start stop, some buttons that run underneath the heating and vent control, you have to relocate those into a replacement ashtray unit, and this was some of the pictures doing that. I managed to use a piece of twin and earth wire to find a pathway through, and then use that to pull the ribbon cable through. You know, the ribbon cable's got quite a big connector, so I carefully kind of wound it round and taped it up and pulled it through smoothly. I would mention that getting the I don't know whether that's hiding anything much, is it? Getting the cigar lighter out of the original ashtray was really quite hard, and take time, take care, just to get those clips on the two sides. Next is, oh yeah, so by this stage I'd filed the sides of this metal bracket that goes under the radio, and then put tape around the edge because I'd cut my hand at least twice. I wish I'd done that earlier. There's the ribbon cable pull through, and we're in business. This final trim panel, I resisted fitting. I mean, start to finish, this lot was probably well over 2 weeks. Not obviously working on it full time, but a few hours most days. And I resisted putting this trim panel on until, you know, I'd been driving the car for a few days without any issues anymore, and kind of finally deciding that it was staying. But when I put this trim panel in, you can see in this video, it's catching on the bottom two buttons on the heating ventilation control, so I had to take the damn thing off anyway. And the next slide shows you how I managed to do that. I think it might be useful to some of you. I managed to put a little screwdriver in there just to give some forward pressure onto the trim panel, and then with a second smallish screwdriver to get in and just lever that little tab up, and that does eventually release it. This little video shows you some close-up of the buttons working when the panel is just on by itself. and B, I'm showing you the configuration of those clips that I just had painful time trying to undo. So it's just, and you'll see this if you have the unit, you'll know what I'm showing you there. Finally, so then I modified this flipping trim panel to give it a bit more. You could say I've taken about 4 or 5 mil off that clip so that it now fits there a little bit more comfortably. So we move on to fitting the reversing camera, which was not a trivial task at all. This is one of these Chinese units you find on the internet, 20 or 30 pounds, various suppliers. I actually had two. I sent one back, it wasn't working, but neither of them fitted. The way they've mounted the pressure switch, which kind of goes across the back of here and sticks up, meant that the unit would not go through the hole in the car without impinging on the bodywork, and so it just physically would not go in the hole. It may fit in an E90, but my car is a touring version, the estate version, and there's no way the kit supplied would go through the hole. So I took the pressure switch from the original BMW handle and glued it in this manner to the camera unit and trimmed off this upstanding piece here. I actually put some extra metal reinforcement on there as well to make sure it lasts the test of time, and that allowed it to actually fit into the bodywork. Within a couple of days of using it, the rubber silicone cover came off in my hand, so that meant the plastic bit was just rattling around in the back, and obviously water would go in. So I had to take it all apart again and put some sealant in, and so far it has held without a problem. It definitely needs a voltage filter, so for about 8 or 9 quid you can get a voltage filter so that when you attach it to the rear reversing lights you don't get some flicker on the camera. I didn't see that, but I just bought the filter from reading other reviews. There's no other place to get a 12 volt supply from. I mean, you'd have to go into the car, which would mean yet another cable going through the tailgate, and I would strongly dissuade you from trying to do that. To get the signal wire through, you have to significantly dismantle the car, and again, you know, feeding one wire through is one thing, feeding two through would be a complete disaster. I think this little video clip here, if I might need to pause it because it shows you the pressure switch working. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the, obviously the, you know, you've got to line that up properly, but it worked pretty well for me. The little pressure switch. Hello. So there we go. So to get the wire through the tailgate, if you get the panels off and remove this clip, you can then straighten out this concertina cord here, and I used the middle conductor, the copper wire conductor, out of some twin and earth, round off the end so it doesn't snag or cut anything, and by carefully feeding that copper wire through, I could then tape the signal wire for the camera to it and feed that through. I had to cut the connector off the end because it's hugely fat, and so I soldered the connector back on when I eventually got it back through and into the right position in the tailgate. You need to remove the seat bench and a heck of a lot of panels to get this wire through, and say not trivial at all. So finally, a little slide. I try and summarize here the pros and cons of these different units. I mean, I liked the way this thing looked like it fits in the car. The price is good. The Bluetooth phone, I don't know if I mentioned that, the Bluetooth to my phone works way better than it did before. You've got all the Android features, maps, ways, videos, whatever you want to do. The rear view camera option is nice. The support response was okay. You know, they answered emails overnight. And against, well, you know, not easy to fit, definitely not for the timid. I think unless you put the 12-volt permanent supply in, then for me it's unusable. The sensors don't work as well as before. The reversing parking sensors don't give you as much confidence, I think, as they did with the BMW radio. You miss out certain warnings, like the side lights left on because the radio shut down by the time you open the door, and so it doesn't register. And the instruction manuals, both fairly useless and quite limited, really. The options you have, these Kenwood Pioneer kind of units, I think they're, you know, big square box and you've got this blank panel around it. I just don't think it looks right in the car. I did find another Zenec unit, but it seems to be discontinued and it was hugely expensive. So yeah, I hope this video gives you some help in whether to choose this if you need to replace your radio or repair it. And take care, drive safely.